Are hip hop fans stupid? Are they dumb? Do they not know what's going on? Oh, my gimbal's falling. Because I'm simply just going to go through some of the basics of how music is distributed, the basics, like the super basics of like what goes on with the consumption of music, especially hip hop. We're gonna have a focus on hip hop, but this kind of works with most genres. But essentially, that's the goal of this video. It's just kind of educate you on what's really going on with the music you enjoy. Maybe explore why you would enjoy certain music and things like that. And we can also get into what has happened with the consumption of the music we have enjoyed. So before we get started, we got to go over some basics, some basics, some super basics. So put in the comments, if you're watching this on the replay, put it there. Um, what is your favorite way to enjoy your favorite genre of music? So if you like rock, where do you listen to it? If you like jazz, classical, hip hop, whatever it is, where do you listen to your favorite music, right? And the reason I ask is because I'm of the belief that most people are streaming their music. They're streaming it and they're pretty much, they're not, I would say, owning the music that they have, but they can have access to it, right? And so what that does is it gives you the opportunity to not have to be responsible clearly for the asset, but at the same time, it does take away the idea of what you have access to when it comes to music, what you can get your hands on, right? And what's offered. And so when we think about that, I asked the question, are hip hop fans the least educated? I do wonder, how are hip hop fans getting to the core of their interests? How are they discovering what they like? Is it search? Is it mostly an expression of like discovery? Like, are they just, typing in keywords and then just picking an artist based on the album cover? Or are people playing samples of things before they, save it to a playlist or download it? How are people getting their hands on their interests when it comes to, I'm asking specifically hip hop, but you can kind of do this with many other genres, right? And so before we get into that, like I said, put in how are you listening to your favorite music, right? I'm going to explain the definition of digital audio. And the reason that's important is because we're going to understand what the literal transaction of a stream or a radio play really is. And so in order to do that, we got to educate ourselves on the definition. So the definition is digital audio is a representation of sound recorded in or converted into digital form. Simple enough. In digital audio, the sound wave of the audio signal is typically encoded as numerical samples in a continuous sequence. So what'll happen is you'll have a wave of sound, and instead of up just visually being up, it'll be one, and then down would be zero, and you just see one, 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 zero, one, zero, one, zero, one, zero, right? And so, for example, in CD audio, samples are taken 44,100 times per second, each with 16-bit sample depth, right? And so if we go in, oh, I lost my page. So if we go in, it says in digital audio using pulse code modulation, bit depth is the number of bits of information in each sample. Basically, if you hit the note A on your saxophone, keyboard, or guitar, that's going to give the computer information, which tells it to turn that information into audio. And that can be MIDI, that can be any form of data that you can turn it into, right? And so Bit depth is the number of bits of information in each sample, and it directly corresponds to the resolution of each sample. So if you have something that's like short in length, long in length, it all gives you different information and it's all in depth. Each or examples of bit depth include compact disc digital audio. Put in the comments where you've heard that before, especially you old 90s, 1900s babies, right? That's just simply a CD, right? And CDs use 16 bits per sample. And so this is a simply this is a simpler way to turn basically a record into something more compact, right? And then if you keep going and keep compacting it, then you'll get a file or a digital little guy that'll simply fit in your phone. You can hide it in a Apple Watch. You can put it in many things, right? And it continues to say digital audio is also the name for the entire technology of sound recording and reproduction using audio signals. There we go. My gimbal keeps failing. There we go. Using audio signals that have been encoded in digital form, right? Following significant advances in digital audio technology during the 1970s and 1980s, it gradually replaced analog audio technology in many areas of audio engineering, record production, and telecommunications in the 1990s and the 2000s. So, in a simple way of explaining that, it got so efficient to use digital audio as a form of music, we started to use it in all forms of media, between movies, pictures, everything, concerts, political speeches, everything, right? And so what then happens is that form of audio gets leverage in the market and then everything else becomes obsolete. Kind of like how the iPhone kind of turned everything else into the iPhone, right? And so when you think about that, you have to consider, okay, how do you manage this information? Meaning like how much of this digital audio is going to be accessible and who's going to control it, right? And so once you figure out, your different laws and things like that, you start to figure out, okay, so let's start making music and albums into, you know, different digital audio forms and soundtracks and things like that. And let's see what people like and what they're gravitating towards. And so once you look at the industry and you start to see, okay, now we have access to all these different genres, and now we can go to FYE, we can go to Best Buy, and we can pick out things and we can find out what we like. It gets faster and faster. So now we don't have to go anywhere to find music. You can swipe away from this stream and find songs. You can play a song while the stream's happening, right? So what directs you towards what to listen to? And typically you would believe it's yourself, right? You would like to think that, yes, I have chosen every song I enjoy, or I know exactly what I dislike, right? You would like to believe that you are in control of that. But in reality, there's the Spotify's and things like that that have to get the music in the first place. They have to have it in order to give it to you. And then secondly, they have to know what makes you tick. They have to know what you like. They can't serve you, fish and chips if you really like burgers and fries. It's not going to work because though those dishes are kind of similar, they're not close at all. And they'll get you a specific result depending on who buys which plate of food, right? So if I'm a Spotify, I have to know that, okay, this amount of fans like this genre, which would be EDM fans, are definitely streaming EDM music, and that's how we'll know that they enjoy these artists, right? So then we will have to find ways to make sure they have access to these things. And the way you make sure you're doing that is by having a unique, efficient, and informal user experience. You have to focus on things that you know the user is going to enjoy, and it's going to keep them locked in for either streaming the music or just in, getting what they want from the app, right? And so when you think of these things, you would like to think you're in control, right? You would like to think, all right, when I go into Spotify, I'm gonna find what I want. Most times, people, when they go into Spotify, there's like 1,000 options splashed into your face right there. So you're not going into this with a plan. You're simply asking the app what's new. It's like an explore page on Instagram. You hit refresh, and then it goes, here's what we got for you. And so when you start to ask that question of, are hip hop fans the least educated? Let's see what's right in front of us when we start to look at these apps. And it's not necessarily something that you're going to look at your own phone to figure out. It's something that's going to be an exponential discovery, because you're not going to notice someone else's playlist. You're not going to notice someone else's dislikes. Each of these apps are personal, they're what you would prefer over and over and over again, or however you consume your music, right? And so if we look back at, this is here, Statista.com, and it says the digital music industry has been gaining momentum over the last decade thanks to consolidation and growth of a wide range of digital platforms for accessing and playing digital music, such as streaming services, downloads, and major digital media players. So a streaming service would be Spotify, right? Downloads would be clearly every time you download. That would be Bandcamp, downloading from BandLabs, BeatStars, SoundCloud, and things like that, where you literally go and click and it sends a file to you. That's a download. Major digital media players. Let's actually look that up so we can be accurate on this. Let's see. So we're gonna look up major digital media players, because I don't want to be incorrect on this one. Oh, my page refreshed. Okay, so we have 47 top digital media companies. Yeah, yep, this makes sense. Okay, so I'll give you a few. So it says the JW Player, Crunchyroll, Medium, The Athletic, Delve, HBO, Consumer Affairs, Hulu, and a bunch more. And basically, these are companies that they play a major role in the market in terms of using these digital platforms. I mean, these digital this digital music in order to create their product. So if HBO were to license one of my songs or something like that, we would be exchanging files. We may be exchanging, records and things like that at some point, but there is a bigger focus on digital media, because they have to make commercials, they got to make drops, they got to do all kinds of different things with the media, reshape it, rehash it, take stuff out and in. And so as a result of this shift in music consumption as it continues, digital music accounted for over half of all the revenue generated by the music industry. I'm not going to repeat that. You heard it right. Over 50% of the music was digital music, right? And this was over, they claim a decade. So from the 1990s to 2000, right? So wherever you were in life in the 1990s to 2000, the world was changing from cassette tapes, from Walkmans, from CD players. Shit, your car shouldn't have a CD player at this point. But people still have these things, but they're just, it's not the thing anymore. It's just not the, we're not doing that anymore. And so in 2021, which is 3 years ago by the time this is recorded, it amounted to a total of $1.1 billion that year. In the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot. But to say that that was 50% of the music industry's generated revenue, which maybe, you know, without adding in merch, ticket sales, sponsors, whatever record companies are doing to keep afloat, right? And it continues to say, by far, the US is the most profitable market for the digital music industry worldwide. It's crazy. So when you hear these things, these are really good things, right? And so don't think like, oh, I can't make money in music or something like that, or I'm not hot, I can't do it. Everybody needs X, Y, and Z to be successful. It's not true. You got to find your slice of the pie. That's apparently $1.1 billion. It's getting moved around. It's just not coming in your bank account, and that's what you're mad about. And so, what does the digital market look like? So, within the US digital music market, streaming and downloading are two of the most popular formats amongst digital music listeners. There were an estimated 116.27 million streaming users in the US in 2022. I feel like that's a big ass number, and a lot of that may be kind of fluffy because there is a culture of theft in America, let's be honest. So we're not going to think like they got 116.27 real names and IDs to go through this, right? Some of them probably like burner accounts. It's probably some dudes that really want to listen to Saweetie, and so they really got like a little fake account making playlists. There's a lot of different reasons people do this, right? But that is a lot of people. And to think, okay, how do we get this many people to help us make money as a genre, right? So if I were hip hop, if I were country, how do I get the biggest slice of that 116.27 million people, right? And so far, you would see Apple, Spotify, and all them, they would have the biggest cut of that pie right now. And it says in the US 2022, the number of people who use downloads to access digital music stood at 47.16 million. That's actually a huge difference. So almost, I would say almost like 60% of people are using regular streaming. They're not downloading anything. So they don't necessarily have their music, right? And so when you think about things like ownership, most fans are they're renting their favorite songs. They're on a pay to play with their favorite songs. Like if you're, God forbid you don't make any money, you won't have any music, essentially. So you're on a blood lifeline for your music right now. As long as you keep working, you can keep listening to your favorite songs. So let me know, what do you think in the comments? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing? Should more people download their artists, favorite songs? Because when it comes down to it, the leverage is still in the hands of the streaming companies, not the record labels or the artists. Because if you think about it, the artists got to be under the record labels who get a deal with the streaming companies, and the streaming companies have all the people. The record labels are trying to get all the people. That's you guys. So if you download it, you would still have access to the record labels if the streaming companies decide they just, not going to give you access to whatever song you don't want or you want. And so they have the leverage as far as how you guys, as fans, this is the whole point, are consuming music. So as long as you consume music as a stream and you're not, investing in music as an asset, Spotify, Apple Music, they will have all the resources and leverage. And this relationship between your record label, your favorite artist record label is going to have to be, uh, that transaction is going to have to be based on their relationship and not necessarily how you feel about, music or what's going on in the culture or anything like that. It may take a hit, but 116.27 million of y'all and only 47 million of y'all are doing something as far as downloads. It just is what it is. Most people are streaming. So it says streaming is expected to take over as the main source for digital music in the country. Clearly. But what does that mean, Does that mean you're no longer going to have the opportunity to own music, or do you have to go straight to the source? Meaning you have to go to fucking jayz.com to buy a Jay-Z album. Otherwise, you can stream it. How does that really work? By 2027, the number of streaming users is projected to increase to about 154 million. Sheesh. In line with the growth in number of users, revenue from streaming is forecast to rise and become the most profitable digital music format in the US. And so it goes into who are some of the big players, right? Some of the big companies that are offering streaming services that are, you know, have access to all the music and things like that. And the big ones, we all know them: Amazon, Apple, Spotify, Deezer, iHeart, right? And it says Spotify has particularly popular amongst young listeners. And I think the reason for that is not necessarily that price point, but it's that free access that they have. I don't think young listeners are of the idea of, or they don't have the idea of owning music. They have the idea of experiencing music, right? A lot of it's kind of like flash in the pan type of, experience for a lot of young listeners. Because if I were to use myself for an example, I would pick up and drop a lot of albums. Like I wouldn't grab an album and stick with it. And that wasn't simply just me doing that. Like that was common amongst my peer group. Like we didn't yup in our white tees for 50 years. We stopped after like a couple summers. We switched to another thing. It was either like a J. Cole or maybe you went to Currency, depending on where you moved and things like that. So for many of us, owning music is probably not the first thing people think in hand. So it says also, amongst the popular music genres, dance, electronic music, R&B, hip hop, and Latin music were more likely to be consumed on streaming services. Yeah, rather than on physical albums. On-demand streaming accounted for 86.7% of all R&B hip hop music consumption in the US in 2021, while 87% of Latin music was consumed via streaming. So let's see what the difference is. Is there a difference? The difference between streaming and on-demand music. I don't think there's a difference, but I don't know. They wrote it as if there was. So let's see if there is. On-demand music. Okay, so I have a website here. Once it loads up. So what I believe it may mean is that you have, like, what I do is I have a playlist of music that basically I would log into Apple Music and it would stream from that playlist, right? It's on demand. I don't own it. Like I can't pull up a file, right? And so I would believe that streaming would be that you would hit play on just the app and music just comes through. So let's see. The meaning of on demand. On demand music contrasts with non interactive webcasting. Non interactive music streaming differs from on demand or interactive streaming because it allows users to play music but does not allow them to select the song that plays next. So like I said, when you hit play on the app and you just go, that's streaming. On demand is when you know what you want to play and you pick it on demand. Non-interactive streams generate a performance royalty for both the sound recording and composition of the song. The performance royalty associated with the sound recording of the song is paid to Sound Exchange, while the performance royalty associated with the song's composition, meaning the instrumental, is paid to the PROs, your performance royalty organization. So, okay, it actually informs you a little bit more. Both webcasting and internet radio are terms used in reference to non interactive music streaming. So when you think of Pandora, when you think of iHeartRadio streaming, I know a lot of DJs, they send to, well, I don't know. Would a DJ stream count? Like, if I could put in the chat and tip the DJ to change the song, I wonder if that's interactive. I would think that's considered interactive. However, the term webcasting can be defined as a broadcast over the internet from a single content source to many simultaneous listeners. Okay, so that's what DJs are doing. DJs and pretty much people who go live on TikTok, live on YouTube like this, they're webcasting. Internet radio would be something different. Like you gotta have licenses and things like that to be called a radio station. You gotta have access to certain frequencies and things like that, right? So therefore, webcasting is also technically applied to on-demand streaming. Interesting. Okay. So webcasting is not interactive streaming. It's on-demand streaming. That's interesting. Okay. Because you can ask the DJ and things like that. And okay, that's cool. So in this guide, however, webcaster will primarily be used to refer to non-interactive streaming services. Internet radio can be defined as digital audio service transmitted over the internet. Internet radio presents listeners with a continuous audio stream of songs, which in the case of non-interactive music streaming cannot be skipped or replayed, similar to traditional broadcast AM and FM radio. And so a lot of it that you'll be experiencing from non-interactive, or I'm sorry, internet radio, not non-interactive, from internet radio would be music that you can't control, would be music you can't replay, would be music you can't skip, and you can just pretty much, I would assume, just rate it, right? And it says the most important thing to remember about non-interactive music streaming is its namesake. The digital service provider, DSP, does not allow you to skip, rewind, skip forward, or know the playlist of songs ahead of time. You may only tune in. And so now that you've understood that, let's kind of identify which is which. Does it tell us here? Okay, so streaming services here, it doesn't really make a difference. So it has some brands up here: Spotify, Tidal, Music, YouTube, Sirius XM, TuneIn Radio, Slacker Radio, Pandora. These are all streaming services, right? But there are some on here that offer, you know, interactive media, non-interactive media. That's interesting. to kind of offer a little bit of everything. So now when you look at, now that we've understand that, the article, it continues to go into like what's a performance royalty and things like that. So then now you look at, let's see here. I have a bunch of stats and things like that here. So now let's actually compare how we're consuming the music that's distributed, right? And essentially, what you'll notice is R&B and hip hop, 86.7, like I said, this is from 2021, are on-demand audio streams. And then 5.5 are video streams. So this kind of explains why the music videos suck now. They just don't make money. We don't watch it, like it's just a fact. Digital track sales, which I would assume being like downloading a single, 1.7. Digital albums, 1.6. Physical albums, meaning you have a literal CD or record, 4.5. So those are actually doing better than digital albums and singles. Interesting. And so other genres here, um, rock does better in physical, but still does the best in on-demand audio. Pop does the best in on-demand and with physical right behind it. Country does best in on-demand with physicals right behind it. Latin music does best in on-demand with on-demand video right behind it with digital track sales third. So physical is nowhere near on demand for Latin music. So if you're making Latin music out here, focus on your music videos and getting your audio on demand audio streams. EDM is doing best on demand audio with on demand video right behind. Physical albums is tying with digital track sales. So EDM is actually doing the most diverse that we're seeing so far. Gospel Christian music is doing the most on demand audio with physical at second, and then children's music is on demand audio with physical albums at 20% for children's music. Oh no, this is world music. I'm sorry. On demand for world music is 67% with 20% on physical albums. Children music is at 82% with physical albums second, all the way down at 8%. So you're still mostly streaming. Jazz music is mostly on demand, but at 27% physical album sales. So jazz musicians are putting their money down. So it is what it is. Classical music, 76% is on demand audio, but 13% in physical sales. So, and they do have digital albums following right behind physical sales. So classical and jazz are pretty diverse with EDM up there. That's pretty diverse. And then the industry total, 81% of everything comes from on-demand streams with physical albums right behind. And the next up would be on-demand video. So it goes audio streams, albums, and then on-demand videos. So this is how we consume the music. I just explained to you what the music is now, how you're getting your music, meaning how do Spotify and things like that get it into your hands. And this is essentially how we control the music industry. Those are the tools we have in front of us. We can tell them what we like to listen to if we go in there with a thought of what we would like to listen to. But other than that, they just putting stuff in your face. You don't know what's hot until they tell you. And so if you enjoyed this, let me know, and I'll make more videos like this. This is just simply me chatting with you guys about something that I noticed going on in the music industry. Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think what you think artists are doing this on purpose? It's the Illuminati? Let me know. Put it in the comments.